Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with Professor Ortiz of Georgetown University. Makes me feel smarter.
I know, I love it.
Now, if you've missed part 1, you need to go back, belly up to that bar and give it a listen, and we'll save a seat right here for you. In part 1, Ricardo, I'll call you Ricardo, even though I really like calling you Professor Ortiz. Took a short dive into your past and talked about your personal journey of coming out and what it means, and then how that affected your studies and the way you teach as well in literature. So if our listeners missed that, they need to definitely go back and hear those amazing stories. What I'd really like to talk about is the literature today changed with the way society, I mean, I'm sure the typical answer is yes, but how do you see that changing with the way we're shifting in society?
Sure. Yeah, of course it is. And it should. And in a sense, it's both. It's not just sort of reflecting and responding to changes. It's also, I think, imagining worlds that don't currently exist and maybe perhaps moving us toward, ways of being that have to be imagined before we can actually realize them. And that's one of the things that we'll say literature, right?
Yeah.
But literature, and when I say the literary in general, I want to include all the other forms of not just storytelling, but forms of creative expression that maybe we always sort of think of as sort of starting with language or starting even with print on the page, but obviously includes all of visual culture. And not just the stuff that tells stories, but stuff that sort of moves you in whatever way. I mean, I think that
like a little podcast called The Designated Drinker Show?
Certainly, at least this. I mean, there clearly a good deal of creative energy went into this. The inventiveness of it, the sort of the genius of it, I think is really impressive. And obviously, again, it's pleasurable, but it's something we should be doing with our time. Is one way to think about it, right? We live in a world that if we listen to certain kinds of signals only, we would think that everything has to be about, a certain kind of productivity, a certain kind of busyness, a certain kind of resilience, a certain kind of just being able to sort of make it in the world. And that could really just sort of eat up all of your time if you let it. And so the fact that we're actually wired to, and I think it's partly because we need to, because it's a way that we take care of ourselves. It's a way that we, I think, make ourselves more the human beings that we are, and show ourselves like why we're busy when we're busy is to have the time to not be busy other times, right? To sort of open up that space to do what we're doing, to talk, right? And to do it over a drink. Sure. If that can happen, then let's have that happen. It certainly does. It's certainly not automatically worse. So, I think that I feel like it's been true historically. I think it not only continues to be true, but I think it's increasingly true that it's just it's in our best interest for us to make this time, to find this time. And if one of the ways that we do that is by either creating, again, these worlds that don't exist unless we create them and then share them with others, right? And have them enter into them with us, enter into them and spend time there together, right? Which is what's happening when you open a book. Mm-hmm. You've accepted the invitation of the writer to go into a world that the writer has made and that the writer invites you to make your own. But it's not instantaneous. It's not something you can do when you're busy. It's something you have to sort of stop being busy in order to do.
Yes.
And then you're in it for as long as you're in it. And it's that time. It's that place that you go to sort of like breathe and think and dream and listen to a voice other than your own, but maybe hear your voice in that conversation too, that I don't know how to live without that. I've never tried to live without it. I don't think I ever want to. And if it's the thing that I do most in my life going forward, I will be a lucky person, and I want to recommend that to as many people as I can.
I definitely read a lot, and I'm always thinking like, how that inspires me, especially like, I used to love like little French stories, and they were very about little witches and stuff. And like The Secret of Pisoulet. Anyway, these things inspired me to do what I do now, like to make cocktails and all, things I do. But I'm wondering, like listening to you and like the literary of it, can we create a society where, where people can exist and we teach them through, a new futuristic utopia where you could be like the gender is important. The sex and the gender is what it is, and it isn't something that has to necessarily take a shape of femininity or masculinity, and you're allowed to just experience. And, is that something that children read? Not children, but as young adults will come up and, the new, classic love story where it is no longer you're fielding, female, male, right? And you can allow the expression of love to be what that is. And am I missing it? Did I miss something? Does that story exist in the new modern classic? I mean, I've seen hints and glimpses of it. I've seen gay relationships and stories and lesbian and I've seen that, but I don't think I've seen like where we're describing a world where you can exist and you find that space and you're creating what it could look like 50 years from now. I don't know. Am I wrong? Is there a book? Is there a book that describes that?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm not so much an expert in sort of speculative fiction and science fiction, but I think that there's been a lot of work happening in that space around imagining, again, sort of these alternative worlds where once you're sort of imagining beings that are maybe like human, but also more than human or other than human, right? You can start to sort of think beyond and imagine beyond, the kinds of embodied lives we thought we only could have, right? That seemed to sort of line up with binary gender and either heterosexual sort of relationships, right? Or where every relationship is still sort of a function of the gender of the two people in it, to something freer and more diverse and more fluid, right? And so, but for me, like I watch a lot of television. So when I was defining the literary before in that really expansive way that goes beyond just like printed text, right, or the fine works of literary artistry, right? I love watching a show like Star Trek Discovery because I think, and it's not the only one, but it's a show that actually loves to play with the possibilities that a world that includes all of these different sort of manifestations of love and of desire and of embodiment play out, and in a way that's accessible to a much wider audience, right, than what we think of it as literature per se. But it's not outside of literature. I think there are ways in which there's a profoundly literary imagination that's there in a show even like that's for popular entertainment in a particular genre, and where the fact that it is futuristic and the fact that it is, and again, something that came out of the brain of Gene Roddenberry way back in the 1960s, but it's had like this life beyond sort of as a franchise, but as a kind of an imagined universe. For me, I want to claim that as literary. I think that that's as much sort of a place where the creative imagination has gone to do the work that I think you're describing, but it's not the only one. And I think there's a lot out there that's doing this, and I just think that this is going to continue. With respect to literary writers who I'm excited by, there are a bunch, and there some relatively younger writers, but there's she's primarily known as a fiction writer, but she's written memoir as well and done some genre stuff as well. But there's a writer named Carmen Maria Machado who published a couple of years ago a collection of short fiction, and the collection is called Her Body and Other Parties. A lot of the stories are speculative, like they take place in a world that's sort of like ours, but not like ours. They're profoundly feminist. They're very much about a kind of female experience, but they're also profoundly queer and profoundly about people with, unconventional bodies and unconventional, identities with respect to more than just gender and sexuality. And I've been reading literature since I was 5 years old. I've been reading stories since I was a very little kid. I'm always really super excited when a new writer, a young writer, an emerging writer shows me the possibility in storytelling that I didn't know existed. And she's one of these people. And she's not the only one, but she's one of my favorite sort of recent examples.
And if you could see him, he's literally bouncing as he's talking about it. That's how excited he's literally bouncing.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
I want that. I want to read that.
So I think Professor Ortiz told us, Gina, that creatives only get more creative when they're lubed. So I'd say what do we dive right into that recipe?
All right, we'll make a cocktail. So if you haven't listened to that first episode, you need to go back and listen to it because we're making an infused olive oil for this martini. And we're going to make what they call a 50-50, okay? 50-50 is when you use 50% gin to 50% vermouth. Now, the reason why you do that is because you're really looking for aromatics, and I like to call it drinkability. Because I love a martini. I could probably drink too many martinis. So if you make them 50-50, you could have more than 100. No, you can have, 2 or 3 and you're still feeling pretty good about it before you start the martini makes a little flip on the glass to the side and now you're spilling it on your lap. Okay, so today we're going to use Sipsmith gin, and I really do love this gin because it is really beautiful aromatics on it. And as soon as you open the bottle, you get this wafting citrus smell, which is one of my favorites. So you're going to pour in here 1.5 ounces of gin, and then you're going to do 1.5 ounces of vermouth. Now you can use a nice dry Spanish vermouth, which is really lovely. Dolan Blanc is a lovely vermouth. I always say use the vermouth you like, vermouth is, obviously 50% of this cocktail. So you want something that, gives you the flavor profile that you're looking for. So, it's the same thing. Eat what you like, drink what you like. So we're going to stir this cocktail. And we have we chilled our coupe glass. And we're going to give this 30 rotations. And if you listen to the show before, everybody knows if you have to ask yourself, how hot is my environment? If you were at a beach and you're making this, then you might have to go 45 times around. If you are in a cold environment, such as outside of Alaska, then you're maybe going only 30 rotations. You're looking for the water dilution and making sure this is nice and cold. And you're also chilling your glass beforehand because why would you pour a cold drink into a hot glass? All right, so we stirred our drink, and now we are going to pour it into our chilled martini. What's a martini glass, really? I keep calling it a coupe, but it's really a martini glass. And we're going to fill that. And now comes the magic, right? So if you've never used olive oil in your drink, this is what you're going to do. You take your spoon and you gather a little bit of your infusion. And if you get 1 or 2 of your little times, it's not a big deal. But the idea is that it goes to the top and you make it in one circle. And if you want 2, do 2. If you're a 3 olive martini person, then do 3. If you like 2 big ones, do 2 big ones. It's kind of really up to you, and it is personal. I love this one right here. I don't know if you can see it, but it has just one little time. Now, recently I've become a big fan of not using plastic in anything. So this is a thyme sprig that I put a little piece of feta cheese and a tomato on, and I'm going to drop it in as my garnish. If you're feeling bigger and you think that you're feeling really prideful at this pride,
Wow.
and you want to get really extravagant, you can put the big garnish on, which I think I'm going to do.
Happy Pride, folks.
Yeah.
And
She's taking her time.
Yeah.
And you're going to stick it in. And as long as it's not too heavy, it'll stay off the side. So there we go. We have the cocktail right there. And everything's going around. So you can see that. And I'm going to pick it up. The feta cheese is really just a snack because I'm a fat kid at heart and I just love cheese. So cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Gina.
Just a nice version of what the cocktail can be.
Lovely. It's so good.
It's delicious.
And you're right, that cheese is a snack.
Yeah. I'll save the cheese for last.
That is so good.
I love the olive oil on this. I think it's just so different, I do love.
Yeah.
Now, I do love eating the olives in the drink, but it's just a little bit different. It's aromatic. It's really sippy and delicious.
I think it's lovely. I could drink these all day.
Yeah, so could I. And I think, I appreciate you introducing me to a whole new world here of olive oil in my cocktail.
You should have fun with it though. Mix different vinegars. Really Sicilian olive oil or a good Spanish olive oil, like a really
That's what this one is.
They usually come in like smaller. Here, I'll show you one. They usually come in like teeny, like smaller bottles.
Okay.
That's what you're looking for. You're looking for something that comes in a very small bottle with a big price tag, and you're like, fuck, that's expensive. But you only need very little bit of it, and it's so fruity and delicious. It's like worth it.
No, thanks for that. This will not be my last cocktail with olive oil in it, I promise.
Perfect.
This is a delicious. I really could drink these.
Yeah.
Too many of these. And I think the good thing is, like she said, the vermouth brings down your alcohol content a bit. It's
Right.
a little light on the, little bit. I like to think it that way anyway.
Yeah. Let's think about it that way. Let's convince ourselves that's true.
Yeah. So back to the conversation. It was really interesting when you were speaking earlier. The first thing that came to my head is before you brought it up was Star Trek, about the fact that when you said, do we see what's to come? You know, and the first thing I was like, oh, Star Trek was that? And because if you think about it, they had, forget his name, Captain, I'm stuck on Picard. Captain Kirk, thank you, I stuck on Picard. Sam, Star Trek junkie too. Sleep with a blue woman. Yeah. Now, let's be honest. So I am half Mexican, half German, Dutch descent of some sort. Okay. And so, I mean, we grew up colored. And I mean, they went straight for the color. I mean, they made her blue. Yeah. But if you think about it, was it that touch on what you couldn't say in this back then? You couldn't have a person of color have a relationship with, and I think it's funny is that I say a person of color, and here she was absolutely blue, with a white man or a white person at that time. I mean, in the 70s, I have to think my mother, growing up in St. Louis, had a few stink eyes, if nothing else, because we grew up in a very white neighborhood, and my father was beautiful bronze skin. So I have to think that they were breaking some barriers there. They had to be in a very gentle way. Sure. Yeah. An acceptable way. Right. Put it that way, in air quotes. But still powerful, right? Yes. And still really meaningful. And I think that's always, again, it sort of goes back to what I was saying originally about, that storytelling has just always been one of the ways, you can call it almost a kind of tool, a technology, or a kind of, an alternative form of knowing, of almost an alternative kind of intelligence that we're, again, using to try to understand ourselves, and to understand ourselves hopefully so that we can not only sort of sustain our lives but improve our lives, but also in a way kind of give ourselves this chance to, as I was saying before, just be human around one another in a way that allows for, time to stop or time to be spent doing something other than working, right? And in a way, just to be able to play, and to have fun in a way that involves an enormous amount of trust. It has to, right? Because it is a very open thing. But it's also, I as I was saying before, I just don't know. I don't know how to be a human being without it, right? And I want this more for more of us, right? Yeah. And in the world that we're living in now, which is such a challenging place, and a place that's, we're almost all the time we're just distracted by all the ways that we're capable of harming one another, and not caring adequately for one another, and not even listening to one another, and certainly being willing to refuse to listen to others' stories, right? I think that this is one of our most basic defenses against that, and one of our most powerful tools away from that, and to this other better thing, right? Which is, I think, where we're most fully human with one another and freest with one another's. Yes. I think, to your point, I think like you said, it breaks down barriers, because I keep saying this, we start to see each other. Yeah. Again, we start seeing each other. We start seeing each other struggle, seeing each other as humans, and realizing we have shared stories. We still have the same shared. We don't have the same. We have shared struggles. Yeah. And I think also through reading, it gives you language that you may not have had. Sure. And insights, but then gives you the language to take that out into the world and move it forward in those conversations that help us all grow.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's, again, I've mostly been a teacher of college students and graduate students. And so I get students when they're a little bit further along in their education and more advanced. But I still feel like it's such a remarkably, again, foundational thing that we do when we teach young people to read, period.
Yeah.
And what to do with that capacity to read from that point on. And it doesn't, it certainly doesn't stop at literature. It's everything else. It's the rest of your intellectual life, but really it's the rest of your human life if you're lucky enough to have it. And again, it is empowerment, but it's also liberation.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. Gina, before we go any further, please help me make sure we do our housekeeping. Where are they going to go to get these tips and tricks? And then I also want to make sure we have the books that Professor Ortiz shared.
You're going to designate Drinker.show for your tips, tricks, and how-to, and then also how to get to Professor Ortiz's books and what he's written. Yep.
Yes.
And the ones that he's mentioned. And then how much it costs to take a class with him at Georgetown, because I'm sure that's expensive.
It is.
You cannot tell a lie.
Georgetown has great financial aid for many of his students, but it's a very expensive place to go to school.
It's a very beautiful place to go to school. It's also...
It is that.
Do I get a discount because both my children were born in Georgetown University Hospital? Because I feel like I would like that.
I wish I could give that to you. I do.
I'd be like,
I think that's a no, Gina.
I did have both my children there. No. Does that make them smarter right away? I don't even know.
By proxy.
I get the feeling your kids are going to be plenty smart.
Yeah, hopefully.
They're your kids.
Yeah, smart asses, that's for sure. They're
You stole the words right out of my mouth, Gina.
Right?
Yeah.
All right. So I got a good one.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So being somebody that's so amazingly well read, obviously, in this day and age when everyone's like identifying themselves with a spirit animal, that's nothing new for you, right? Because like the Hopis have been doing that forever. When Grandmother Spider is such a powerful beginning of like Ishbalankan and all that kind of mythology of American, Indian mythology that, was part of the founding of this country, right? You can identify yourself as one ingredient that would describe your spirit, whether it is for food or for beverage. What would that ingredient be and why?
Wow. That's a really good question. And I'm just going to give you, I think, a really silly, stupid answer.
First one that comes to your head.
Oh, yeah, sugar.
Sugar.
Yes.
Oh, sugar.
Oh, just for every reason you can imagine. It's sweet. It usually makes most things taste better, or tries to anyway. And it's not necessarily bad for you, but it's also not necessarily good for you.
There you go.
The moderation answer. I love it.
And it's also addicting. So,
And there is such a thing as too much sugar. You can't have enough.
Oh, I do like that. It's very cute. I love that. Good answer.
Well, thanks for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you. This is a blast.
Elevating all of us, hopefully, to inspiring us. Make me feel smarter just for being in the same room with you. Thank you.
I'm going to be like, did you hear our last episode? It's really good.
Yeah.
Also, we were drinking martinis, pinkies out.
Yep.
Always pinkies up.
Yep.
It is what it is.
Hello.
I don't know how to do it any other way. It's how the martini glass is made, right?
I mean, it is made for that.
All right. Well, cheers to both of you, to a happy and celebratory Pride, and reading more.
Cheers.
The Designated Drinker Show is produced by Missing Link, a podcast media company that is dedicated to connecting people to intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Also in the Missing Link lineup of podcasts is Roger That, a podcast dedicated to guiding you through the haze of dementia, led by skilled caregivers Bobby and Mike Carducci. Now, if you're looking for a whole new way to enjoy the theater, check out Between Acts, an immersive audio theater podcast experience. Each episode takes you on a spellbinding journey through the works of newfound playwrights, from dramas to comedies and everything in between. Find Missing Link's League of Podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Please don't forget to subscribe, download, and review the shows. Your review helps our shows reach new audiences. To find out more about Missing Link, visit missinglink.company. That's missinglink.company.